Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bridge Cultures. Today we have a very special journey to Australia. But first, we go to our video. See you in a minute. Hello, welcome everyone. I can see people over there. Hello, Manuela. Hello, today we have the Bridge Culture, that is a project of ISIC, Interassistential Service for the Internationalization of Conscientiology. And we have three special inviters that they are also volunteers of ISIC as me. My name is Virginia Ruiz, for the ones that don't know me, and I'm a volunteer from ISIC. And let's introduce the other inviters. Kim, hello, welcome. Jaclyn, Cowen, hello, welcome. And Jeff, Lloyd. Hello, everyone, be very welcome. I will ask them to introduce themselves so you can know a little more about them, and you will understand why we are talking today about the Australia and the international journey today.
Hello, thanks Virginia. Hello everybody. My name is Kim McCaul. I'm based in Adelaide, Australia. I'm an anthropologist. I work with Aboriginal communities in Australia, where I've been here for 24 years. Originally, I'm from Europe, grew up in Germany, and I'm also a volunteer with ISIC and have been a researcher and student and teacher of conscientiology since 1997.
Hey guys, it should be ladies first, but I'll go next. Jeff Lloyd, likewise as everyone else, I volunteer for ISIC. I've been involved in conscientiology since 1996, but more intensively since 99, and been teaching for a couple of decades and the like as well. So lots of experiences in different fronts and different lines of knowledge and different areas of research. And I'm Australian. I live now, I was born in New Zealand, but I have dual citizenship. So I have Australian citizenship, and I live on the Sunshine Coast. So we're actually going to be talking about different parts of Australia and different opportunities for you guys to experience, perhaps later on if you come to the conference later on in the year, which Kim is showing you the venue behind him and his image behind him. And so anyway, yeah, be interesting to talk, but we'll catch up more later.
And hi, everyone. I'm Jaclyn. I was born and raised in Sydney, so I grew up there for most of my life. Then I moved to Foz do Iguaçu in Brazil, where I've been for the last 10 years. I have a background in urban design, but I work as an English teacher here in Brazil. And
I think she's frozen. A little, the internet, maybe, in the morning, early morning. Now, you are back. No, not yet. Okay, so she's coming, no worry. So I think they will present, right, each of them, the city where they live. So Kim will start the presentation, then Jeff, and in the last moment, Jaclyn.
hello.
Hello. You are back.
Yeah.
Please finish.
Yeah, so I just got to know about conscientiology in Sydney with Jeff and some other volunteers in 2007. And I've been teaching and been involved with conscientiology as a volunteer with ISIC and with CIAC as well, more recently. And that's it. I look forward to talking about the place I came from, Sydney. So and how it's connected with the event as well.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with Kim. presenting Adelaide. And let's go there.
All right. And so while Virginia gets up the presentation,
Yes.
the motivation for this talk today really is that we're organising an event here in Australia in October, 18 to 20 October 2024, the first Australasian Pacific Conference on Parareurbanology and Serenology. And so in that process, we would like to share a bit about the holothosene of Australia. So those of you who are thinking about coming can already tune in to the energies. And also, even if you don't think Australia is on your travel plan for this year, just maybe understand how these ideas might relate to this faraway part of the world, far away for a lot of you who aren't here.
Okay, perfect. So people can do questions during the presentations, and after we will have some time also to discuss. So please be free to interact in the whole conference, okay? We have here the...
Okay, and can I control this, Virginia, or no?
Yes. Can you see the... Can you... or I can do it.
Yeah, I think you have to do it. I don't know. I can't see how to do it. So we will each of us be talking about a different city, a different area, region of Australia, and with a focus on the holothosene of that place. And so very briefly, what is a holothosene? It's a neologism in conscientiology that refers to the accumulation of energy generated through thoughts and sentiments. And so basically, we're all generating thoughts and sentiments all the time. And as we do that, we create energy, and that builds up. We do this individually, and we do this collectively. And when we start looking at a town or a country or a city, then it becomes important to consider the history and the long-term ideological and leadership models of the society that dominated that location, because they define the thoughts and feelings of thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes millions of people in seemingly subtle, often unconscious ways, but it accumulates over time. And Australia, for various reasons, has quite a distinct holothosene. Next slide, please, Virginia. So this, I'm just going to show you three different maps just to give you a bit of a perspective. This map is showing Australia in a sort of stylized way, the Aboriginal people who lived here for, we don't really know how long. The dates keep being pushed back, 50,000, 70,000. I think they're around the 70,000 years now. And so these different colored areas suggest different language groups. There's about 200 or so different language groups traditionally in Australia. And as you can see, it looks a little bit like you might imagine a map of Europe or other parts of the world where there's many different countries, right? So before Europeans came, there were many different countries here for thousands and thousands of years of indigenous people. Next slide, please. And then Europeans came and they colonized Australia in 1788. The English, and not straight away, but over the next 40, 50 years, they divided the place up into different states. So today I'll be talking about South Australia, which is where Adelaide is. Jeff will be talking about Queensland in the north east, and Jaclyn about New South Wales, where she grew up in Sydney. Next slide, please, Virginia. So this is South Australia. The capital city is Adelaide in the very south. And when you look at a map like this, it kind of might give the impression that there are towns sort of spread out through the state, but it is very misleading in that a lot of these dots that show up as towns may consist of 10 or 15 people or so. The vast majority of people in the state live in Adelaide and the surrounds and the sort of the southeast. So if you go from Adelaide to the southeast, you're probably talking about 90+% of the human habitation of South Australia. Everything north of Port Augusta is basically desert, and it's very sparsely populated. Next slide, please, Virginia. So the current demographics of South Australia is that we have 1.8 million people, 2.4% of whom identify as Aboriginal people. 77% of the people live in Adelaide or Greater Adelaide, about 1.3 million. And then, as I said, the vast majority of the remaining 500,000 live in the southeast, and a very small number of people live in the north of Adelaide, in the largest part of the state. Very few people. It's in terms of holothosene, I was talking before about how long Aboriginal people have been in this country, and we understand that over that time, a community of people who maintain a distinct and strong cultural presence build up a very distinct holothosene. But today, as you can see by these numbers, Aboriginal people represent a tiny fraction of the population of the country and of South Australia. And yet, when you're working with communities, as I do, I work with Aboriginal communities all the time, you see that there's still a very strong holothosene that's left, that stayed here, connected to this ancient past. But it kind of has a parallel existence to the new holothosene that's been brought here by outsiders, many of whom have almost no interaction with Aboriginal people whatsoever. And so when we look at the population of Australia, or generally, this is from the recent census, population census, 2021 or 2020, 70% of Australians now were born in Australia, which means 30% were born overseas. And when you start looking at where parents came from, then 50% of the population have at least one parent who was born overseas, which is quite a significant number when you think about, especially when you compare this to what we call the old world, right, in Europe. And I would imagine the same in most of Asia or Africa, where there's been a long-established nations of people, communities of people, where the majority of people are born among their community. Here, as you can see, a large number are born elsewhere and they've come here. And it's quite interesting, and I was surprised actually to see that the top countries where people are from, England, not surprising, they're the first colonizers here, but then India, Italy, and China speaks to some of the cultural diversity that's been kicking in. Next slide, please, Virginia. So thinking just about, well, these key founding events relate to Australia, and then narrowing down towards South Australia. So Australia was first reported on by Europeans in 1627 by a Dutch seaman, and then it was Dutch and Portuguese who occasionally reported about seeing various parts of Australia, but it didn't look very interesting to most Europeans. It's very arid. Much of Australia is arid, and even the non-arid parts in the very north don't offer the kind of fertile areas that Europeans like to colonize. Also, the early reports suggest that when Europeans came close or landed, the reception they received often wasn't very friendly. And so generally they didn't really care so much. It just wasn't of interest for quite a while. The majority of what is now Australia was annexed officially by the English in 1788. So it was more than 150 years after first being reported that somebody decided to actually go and plant their flag in European style and say this now belongs to us. They did this in what is now Sydney. And at that point, I don't exactly know on what basis, but they drew a line through the country and up to a certain point in what is now sort of the eastern part of WA. They said this is now all part of the United Kingdom. So at that point, South Australia, for example, became officially part of the United Kingdom, but nobody had really been here at this point. No white people, no Europeans had really been here. The coastline of South Australia then was first mapped in 1802 by Matthew Flinders, who was coming from the west, and by the French explorer Nicolas Baudin, who had come from the east. And at that time, England and France were at war. So there was some tension between the two ships meeting, but they actually had a friendly encounter in a bay south of Adelaide that is now called Encounter Bay. And that's where they met. They exchanged some notes. They told each other what they discovered. And based on this, there are actually quite a lot of French coastal names in South Australia, especially on the west coast and on the southern part of just south of Adelaide. Fleurieu Peninsula is the name of the closest tourist region that if you were to come to Adelaide, you would probably want to visit because it's beautiful. And so then after that, it was another 34 years before South Australia was officially proclaimed as a colony. And the following year, Colonel Light planned out the city of Adelaide. And you probably can't really see that on the right there, but this is one of the early drafts of the city plan with the River Torrens running through the middle, North Adelaide at the top, and then what's now just known as Adelaide to the south. And if we can go to the next slide, please, Virginia. Yeah, so there was a few interesting things about the early founding of South Australia that distinguish it somewhat from the rest of the country. And if we think about these as instances or moments in history that set a tone, that create group karmic, so connections for the karma of the people that then started coming to this place and that will continue to come to this place into the present. These early events, they set a certain tone, right, that has repercussions across time. It's really interesting to start thinking about history from those perspectives of the karmic dynamics that were set in place and the ethical ramifications that we might be dealing with, good or bad, the actions of our ancestors or maybe of ourselves in past lives. So there's a few things I just picked out. And obviously, generally, right, this is a 20-minute presentation. So this is really just skimming the surface. But South Australia was colonized, as part of South Australia, was colonized with what was called a letters patent, which was a royal instruction to the governor from the Crown of England at the time to the new governor of South Australia about how this should be managed, right? And among the various instructions, it included this clause that nothing in those our letters patent shall affect or be construed to affect the rights of any Aboriginal natives of the said province to the actual occupation and enjoyment in their own persons or in the persons of their descendants of any lands therein now actually occupied or enjoyed by such natives. Basically, they were saying that us coming here, us Europeans coming here, should not stop the original inhabitants here, the Aboriginal people, from continuing to enjoy their occupation. Obviously, this was not honoured because from the very beginning, Aboriginal people were dislocated from their place here in Adelaide, for example, where the European settlement first started. So it's interesting how this was rationalized at the time. That I think the term actual occupation and enjoyment was interpreted very specifically, and as Europeans saw very few houses or fences, or in fact they saw none at all, no fences, or what they interpreted as like improvements to the land, they justified that people weren't really occupying on the land as such. This is something that is actually filtered through. So there's still to this day attempts made to use the letters patent to assert rights for Aboriginal people today. Religious freedom. So there was a philosophy in Australia, in South Australia in particular, that it should be a non-religious, in the sense that there should be no prescribed religion. All the other colonies that England had usually started, including in Australia, prescribed the dominant religion in England at the time. And so here there was a model of religious freedom, and there was active encouragement of persecuted minorities from Europe to come to Adelaide. So there was Methodists, Unitarians in Prussia. The Lutherans were being actively persecuted and forced to change certain aspects of their religion if they wanted to remain in Prussia. So a lot of German Lutherans came to South Australia. And South Australia also had the first mosque in Australia in the 1800s. And it was called City of Churches as early as 1868. Thinking about this, we're thinking that Aboriginal religion was in fact often suppressed by Christian missionaries. And today, the majority of South Australians identify as non-religious in the census. But I think it's still worth something one could explore, right? There is quite a diversity also now in what we might call New Age spirituality, or different kinds of spiritualities in Adelaide. There's quite a richness of different, I guess, groups and so on, following different ideas. So it's something that has continued. In 1896, South Australia was the first government in Australia and only the second in the world after New Zealand to allow women to vote, and it was the first in the world to allow women to stand for election. So that's got some significance on the historic stage. And the final point that has ended up right in the very bottom of that slide that I think is just worth mentioning is that South Australia was the site of nuclear testing in Australia between 1956 and 1963. The English dropped a series of nuclear bombs in the outback, dislocating some of the local Aboriginal people whose country that was in the process. And obviously that is an act that still has ramifications that I don't have time to go into now, but that is filtered through in many different ways. Next slide, please, Virginia. So this is something I discovered actually just in preparing for this, is the focus on science in South Australia. Adelaide is the birthplace of 3 Nobel laureates, which is more than any other Australian city. And it is the home of more than a dozen nationally leading scientific research institutions, including the Royal Institute of Australia. We have the National Wine Centre. We have the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, which is a very leading edge health facility. And in fact, generally, South Australia has a number of world leading medical specialists and research scientists. We also have the Waite Research Precinct, specializes in agricultural and environmental science. There's a series, as you can see, there's a series of institutions around in the area of health. We do also have some major defense and aerospace research agencies, because South Australia is home of a international rocket launching facility that is used for both military and non-military projects and experiments and all those kinds of things. So yeah, there's a surprising amount going on in a state of only 1.8 million people. Next slide, please, Virginia. Yeah, I just wanted to chuck that in. This is I just thought it's so beautiful. It's the old State Library building, and it is, I guess, one of the earliest scientific institutions in South Australia. Which, if you are coming to attend our conference, we will do a little tour. There's a museum in the bottom floor of this that has some really great displays. It's got a great holothosene to sit and do some writing and reading, and it's open to the public to use for those reasons. Next slide, please, Virginia. Contemporary holothosenic aspects of the city, and I have to go fairly quickly. So Adelaide is known as a green city. City of Parks is also a name that it has. It's defined by, there's parks all over the place. There's parks around the CBD. There's parks all through the city. There's an abundance of imminent energy. The ocean in the west, as you can see in this picture, the hills in the east. And I was reminded a bit of Rio de Janeiro. Any Brazilians here, if you've been to Rio de Janeiro, you also have the ocean on the one side and the hills. And in fact, it's also on the west and the east. Very different story, however, in terms of the density of population and the amount of greenery that's in between the two in Adelaide. And so this photo here is actually taken from Mount Lofty, which is the highest peak near Adelaide. And it's a bit hard to see, but everything beyond that ridge, and then you've got the ocean, that flat area is the city, actually. And there's the airport and all that. But when you're looking from here, it just looks green, basically. Adelaide is increasingly multicultural. In the 24 years that I've been here, I've seen a big change from very Anglo. It was one of the more Anglo sort of cities in Australia. And that's really shifted. It's much more diversity with much more noticeable Asian population now, but also African and European diversity as well. And something that I think is tangible in Australia generally and in Adelaide in particular is if you come from Europe, if you are in Europe, you can really notice a certain density of the holothosene, of people's attachment to their city, to their country, to their language that's in place. And when you come here, there's a lightness there that just is different because there's a diversity of people, and everybody that's coming here is trying to be Australian. So people are generally letting go of a lot of their old patterns. Next slide, please, Virginia. I don't really have time to speak about this much. I just wanted to show this. Coming back to the beginning where I showed the map of Australia with the Aboriginal nations, and I'd mentioned there's these two holothosenes living in parallel. Truth-telling, this is a sign down on the south of Adelaide, at the Fleurieu Peninsula, in fact, by an Aboriginal artist inviting a dialogue between Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people about the truth of colonisation. And from a holothosenic point of view, these steps towards reconciliation and towards unifying in a way the ancient holothosene and this new arrival is an essential evolutionary step. And that's really it. So I think the last slide is just an invitation to come and join us at this venue in October 18 to 20, 2024. On to Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jeff is here. Thank you, Kim, for the presentation. We have a question, but I think we can ask at the beginning, at the end, okay, of the presentation of Jack.
Sure.
Okay. Here it is.
So yes, mine doesn't have as much history as Kim's does, but I would add a little segue actually. Colonel Lloyd, who Kim mentioned in his talk, he was perceived as an extra-physical consciousness at a presentation, a talk we were giving in Brazil one time many years ago. He seemed to be present. And so it's interesting to see and perhaps reflect a little bit what is the connection of conscientiology and the group of consciousnesses involved more or less with conscientiology, both intraphysically and extraphysically, with kernel light. But anyway, I won't digress too much. So this really tries to capture this slide here, the Sunshine Coast. So this is the region where I and Margali live now, along with a bunch of others such as Tony and Muskov and Tatiana Mota. They also live on the Sunshine Coast now as well. And João and Gabby and Manuela and Mark and the like aren't very far away either. So anyway, there's a wee collection of independent researchers of conscientiology in the area. And what obviously you can get the idea from this, it's very connected with nature. It's very connected with the coastal lifestyle. It's warm. The weather's generally nice year round. Obviously rains a bit these days, a lot, but it's called the Sunshine Coast for a reason. So yeah, there's an abundance of sunshine, and you can see these quite famous mountains down below there, the Glasshouse Mountains in that bottom picture. And they were first spotted by Europeans, at least, James Cook and his crew, when they were traveling up the coast. So obviously volcanic eruptions back then, and then there's been erosion since then, and these plugs have remained. Next slide, thanks, Virginia. Just another thing in this one, I'm not going to be talking so much about historical facts and so on, but a little bit more of personal experiences. So it's even more important to emphasize the idea of the principle of disbelief, which is stated pretty succinctly in these words here. So take it as an idea and personal accounts of certain things I'm going to cover quickly in this talk. But as a general philosophy for life, the principle of disbelief is a great one to keep in mind anyway. It helps it helps maintain a more independent mindset, I believe, or I think. How's that? So Sunshine Coast, yeah, in terms of a place to live, it's a peri-urban region. So what that means is it was a very rural region originally, predominantly, but it's becoming more and more urban. The population's just below 400,000, and they think it's going to double within the next 20 years. So it's become a very popular place for people to move to and to visit. So there's a lot of tourism. There's some really great, cute, wee, quaint coastal towns and nice ones. A lot of the restaurants and beaches and stuff which Australia is very famous for. It's also the start. It borders the Coral Sea. So the Coral Sea is obviously the part of the ocean which contains the Great Barrier Reef, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in more detail later. But as an urban area, it's really quite large. There's no one major city. Brisbane is about an hour and a half to the south, but the Sunshine Coast itself covers a region of approximately 60 kilometres up the coastline. You can sort of see in that map there, the highlighted region down there in the bottom right of that slide. And I mentioned its location in relation to Hervey Bay because those of you who have heard me talk about a potential Serenissimus who lives in that region, at least to the best we can identify at this time. Hervey Bay is about 2.25 hours to the north of where we live now. So next slide, thanks. So again, just mentioning characteristics of the region a little bit more in terms of what it's like. You've seen some of the photos and a little bit of the ideas of what it feels like to be here. It's very relaxed, very natural and comfortable place to be in. There's no ostentation or pretension. It's very informal and horizontal, the society, which I think is great. None of the stuff that's more particular is that relatively close to the location of a Serenissimus. So just for the recording and for those who don't know, a Serenissimus is the most evolved consciousnesses who still have physical lives on Earth. We think they're in their last handful of physical lives before they no longer need to enter into this sort of imposed cycle of having physical existences and all the stuff that brings. So they're really advanced in many ways. They've learned a lot. They've evolved themselves to a really high level, and they're able to undertake and assume tasks of substantial responsibility. And so being close to a Serenissimus and trying to understand that Serenissimus more is a really interesting adventure, experiment, approach to life, and trying to learn and grasp more about, well, how do we ourselves evolve and get to that condition ourselves. So the word Coralis there is just the nickname that was given to the Serenissimus, and that's based on largely, we believe, the Serenissimus's affinity with the coral reef, obviously a massive living organism off the northeast coast of Australia. So great things around here. You've probably seen those pictures already. The beaches, beautiful nature, the beaches, the mountains, the coastline, really stunning, and just very nice to be immersed in such quality of immanent energies. As mentioned, it's really casual and organized, the holothosene. If you could just pop back to the previous slide. Thank you. And the population's growing a lot as well, as I mentioned. And here's a few ideas just related to the ortho thoughts, or from the book Ortho Pensatus that Walter Vieira wrote and published in 2014. So here's a few ideas around the Serenissimus. So an improvement in the intraphysical holothosene occurs when the Serenissimus being is reborn, frequently even before there is Homo. So in this environment, in this area, let's try and see what is occurring in the holothosene, the transition from a very rural environment to one that's slightly more urban, but still very in touch with nature, greater care for the ecology and so on. There's a strong presence in this environment, in this region as well. And also, interestingly, Kim mentioned health studies and so on. There's a very renowned university here on the Sunshine Coast, even though it's still quite a new university. The medical department in the area and research groups associated with it have done really quite well and are really quite strong, even though it's still a very new sort of facility. The foundation of serenology is based on the self-confidence and assistentiality of the consciousness. This is really lovely phrase and sentiment to sort of get into and dive into. And if a person studies the structure of human serenity, it changes their own lives for the better. So these are some thoughts that Dr. Vieira put down on paper to help us even try to, I suppose, refine and improve our own thosenity more and more. Can we go to the next slide? Thanks. So while let's talk about the Serenissimus, a lot of people when I was here in the early 2000s asked, well, where's the Serenissimus in Australia? And I didn't have an answer. And then if we go to the next slide, we'll start to see, well, something happened later on after 15 years or 12 years, however long, when I started to get an answer to this. So I had chosen a place to go away to try to have try to find and try to identify an area where a Serenissimus may be. You can look at a map and just put your finger on it and try to work things out, try to tune it with the Serenissimus and so on. So anyway, I chose Hervey Bay. I went there, and there was a whole series of synchronicities. I don't have time to go through them today. I've presented it in other videos. You can probably see it's about an hour and a half long, presenting a whole series of events that happened during the trip and the planning and up to it. And then when I arrived in that region, it was really interesting, right? Very interesting environment. Really felt really lovely energies. Everyone was being super kind, warm, and it was just a very, very nice experience. So, I had a rental car and I was driving to the hotel, and an idea came, take the next left. And it's a very calm road. There's not a lot of cars or anything. So it's very, stress-free. I took the next left. And it's a normal street, but there was a sign on this street, and you'll see on the next slide. Thanks, Virginia. A really big sign with a word that you don't normally see in Australia, particularly, and this is sereno, right? So sereno, being close to Serenissimus. So when I saw that, and this is in Hervey Bay on street called New Street. When I saw that sign, I was like, I realized what was being communicated, because it's not every day that I pay attention enough and I get the ideas of, take the next left or do this or do that. I think those intuitions are always there, but many times we're too preoccupied with other things. But on this day, it was very clear. And then it basically directed me to this moment. And the information that I deducted was, well, okay, there's a serenissimus in this region. And I'd already been thinking about that a number of times building up to this whole trip. And then this was like a confirmation. And when I saw that and I realized that there was a massive shower of energy, the next slide's fine, thanks, Virginia. A very strong shower of energy, prolonged feelings of euphoria. And so I was like giggling out loud. If someone walked past the car at that stage, I would have thought, like, who's the weirdo? Because I was just sitting there just sort of laughing and enjoying the moment. And so then just some other thoughts. So this is it's a very superficial overview, but just to give you an idea, and I'm looping this into things because if you come to Australia for the conference, you can obviously be in Adelaide for the conference, and then after that, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? Jaclyn's going to be talking very soon about a visit to Sydney, which is great. All the planes basically go through there to fly to South America again, so you're likely to be there. If you do want to do another leg to the journey as well, then I would suggest this region up here on the Sunshine Coast is a great one to visit. So that's why I'm sharing all this information and giving you a little bit of a carrot to come and see. The street was called New Street. So is this a relatively new Serenissimus? It might be taking things a little bit too literally, a little bit too simply, but worth asking the question. What is my and our relationship with the Serenissimus? How involved are they? How conscious are they of the efforts of conscientiology? How much does this Serenissimus support those activities? And also, look, if we've been made aware of that Serenissimus to some degree, is that an invitation to be a part of their team? Like, are we expecting a formal letter, or is this as good as it gets in terms of us trying to extend our own selves? Let's go to the next slide quickly, thanks. So, a lot of different experience when I started to share this, tell other people about this experience. Usually when I was recounting what happened, I'd have prolonged energetic showers, although once or twice it didn't happen, but the vast majority of the times it did happen, which sort of, again, was more of a confirmation. I was tuning in with those energies of the Serenissimus again. I went back a couple of years later with others, and I was sort of seeking to verify, like don't want to take things for granted. You want to go back and test things again. And, I had 7 lucid projections in one night when I was there. And just sort of interestingly, as I mentioned, now we live relatively close to Hervey Bay, and come visit after Adelaide if you're so inclined. Last slide, I think. And there's just an interesting one for all of us, I think. One of the hotels up in that region, the Mantra Hotel, this is what they have on their card, on the key card for the doors, which just sort of caught my attention because it's sort of the point of existence and life and evolution, isn't it? Is us unlocking our own potential and developing our own potentials. So I just wanted to leave that with you all, and I think that's the last slide. So thanks, guys. Over to Jack.
Thank you so much. Very interesting. We will talk later, and then let's welcome to Jaclyn to present Sydney. Please, what do you want?
Thanks, Virginia. We've been given a bit of an overview of Australia. Now we're coming to Sydney. So, I'll be talking a little bit about the Sydney's holothosene and a few little reflections about reurbanisation at the end. So let's have a look here at Sydney. So this is the place I come from. I grew up in, so I have a very strong connection to Sydney. So but Sydney is Australia's most populous city. So it has a population of 5,200,000 people, around about that. It might be a little bit more now. So it's 1/5 of Australia's population. So right from the beginning, as Kim mentioned, when the first fleet came, the first ships, came to Australia, they settled here in Sydney. So its history is very interesting because it began as a convict settlement. So the convicts were the criminals that came, well, so-called criminals, because they were even for very small little, how could I say, things that they did, they were sent to prison. Usually most of them were like petty criminals, I would say. They stole little things to survive, because of the poverty and all that. But anyways, they came over, and because there wasn't enough space in the UK, so they sent them over, thinking that they were going to be sent to the ends of the earth, and it really, for a lot of these people, it gave them this new opportunity to have a different life, to have a life of good quality. Of course, they served their sentence, but afterwards they were generally given plots of land and to live on that land. And then after that, free settlers came, and it grew from there. So there is a strong British heritage. So from the beginning, it was mostly people from England, Ireland, Scotland. And this is strongly reflected in the culture and in the built form, even though afterwards, after a period of time, there was like waves of immigrants, like, Kim was mentioning as well. It's become very diverse, multiculturally speaking, but there is still that, that heritage, that British heritage. So going to the next slide. Sydney reflects, how could I say, it has a multicultural diversity that is reflected in Australia, the Australian holothosene as a whole, right? But just looking specifically at Sydney. So I'm going to be talking now about the different holothosenes of Sydney, right? So it has this strong British influence, but you can see that over time, it's increased in diversity. It always has been a multicultural city, but over time, even more so. So we can see that 43.2% of Sydney's population were born overseas, which is a huge amount. And thinking about how many people had parents as well that came from other countries. For example, in my case, I'm Australian born, but my parents, they came from South Africa. They migrated from South Africa in the late 70s to Australia, just before I was born. And so you can see the makeup, right, is made up. Most of these immigrants come from China, India, England, Vietnam, and the Philippines. So you can see, while there's a lot, that come from England still, but you can see this strong Asian influence, right? Specifically from China. China is one of the biggest groups that are coming. And this is connected with the proximity, right, where Australia is located in the Oceania area, region, right? So going to the next slide. So one of the things that I connected very strongly to, and which Sydney and Australia as well has an abundance of nature, right? It's very, very present. And this is something that people connect to strongly. So, for example, and I'll mention another slide, people like to enjoy their time outdoors because of the good climate. Sydney has a great climate. There's only a few very, very extremely hot days throughout the year, but most of the time it's a very pleasant climate. And it's known for its many harbours. So in one of the images you can see with the harbour bridge that connects two parts of the city. But it has lots of different bays, and it's, how can I say, it snakes around, and it kind of, how could I say, it's very much present in many areas of Sydney. So also another thing which is unique to Sydney is that it's surrounded by national reserves, like we call it the bush here in Sydney. It's like a particular nature with the trees, the eucalyptus trees, which are very present. And so you can see in the image and below, this is one of the national parks, and the nature it's more of a dry, like dry nature, like with the trees, but it's very beautiful and very, very abundant, very strong. And so it surrounds Sydney. And also we've got, like, I grew up next to what's known as the Ku-ring-gai National Park, which incidentally, this name Ku-ring-gai is an Aboriginal name, right? So in a lot of the names, you'll see these Aboriginal names. And so I grew up right next to the reserve, to the bush. And so we used to go in there and take sometimes long walks to another area of, Sydney. So it's very, very nice. And of course, we've got running from the north to the south, all the beaches, right? We've got the coast. So, it's just you're immersed in nature, right? And a lot of people take advantage of that, including, going to the beaches. So moving forward to the urban form, this is something that more and more Sydney is investing in to really revitalize spaces, make them more people-friendly. So, for example, you have the main street inside of Sydney known as George Street, which used to be car dominated. Now they've removed all the cars and make it pedestrian friendly, just for people. They're very much interested, like, in urban design, because that's my profession. So for me, it's really great to see Sydney being transformed, and it's a place for people, right? There's public spaces, lots of free things to do, free events as well. But people like to have go to, like, a park and have a picnic, or walk around, and it's very inclusive, the space, very very livable. So moving on to the next slide. So I mentioned people, Sydney-siders, the name we give for people that live in Sydney. They do enjoy a very high quality of life. Of course, it's a costly city, so it's expensive, so people have to work hard, right? But at the same time, they get to enjoy their free time. There's lots of things to do in the city, but they enjoy maybe having a barbecue, or having picnic, or spending time outdoors. For example, on the bay, like going on a yacht, or going for walks, or eating out at restaurants or cafes. So there's lots of things to do. In terms of, so I've mentioned a few positive aspects, and of course I went through it very briefly because we don't have much time, but I will mention also some counterpoints, right? Just to give you like more of an overview. So there is this aspect, and especially for me living in Brazil, I noticed this a little bit more, that and maybe there are some differences between the different cities, but for Sydney, I notice there is a greater level of materialism. So like this, less inclined to accept multidimensional reality, and more focused on the conventional materialistic paradigm, right? So only the physical body exists. Although that is changing a little bit, you see certain groups, spiritual groups emerging, but still on the whole, it's kind of absent of this other reality, talking about it. So there is but there, on the other side, there is a tendency to be less religious. So there is more skepticism, there's more questioning of things, there's more, so there's always
she got a little frozen, right? I think this is coming in a minute. Yeah, it's the internet here. Okay.
Just on that, I can fill some space until she returns. Again, it was also interesting to see the tendency to be less religious, right? Like it was a similar thing in Adelaide and also up here in this region as well. I think it may be I know in more educated societies or more educated states in India, for example, the tendency to be less religious is very present. Jax, you're back.
Oh, great. Thank you for that.
We are lucky that Jeff lives in Sydney.
Yeah, that's great. So you can add a few comments.
Back to you.
Okay, so hopefully I can keep going without any more internet issues. But so about, you can see about 38.4% of the population stated no religion. And that's not to include those people who did state a religion, their level of religiosity, right? So, and so it tends to be lower. So let's move to the next slide. Yeah, another aspect also connected, I think, a little bit with this materialism is the materialistic culture. So, people like to consume a lot. People are known, they are focused on making money, on having a good quality of life and all the comforts that brings. And at the same time, taking advantage of, the consumption of things. So there are lots of shopping centers, and on one hand, it's nice, right? But at the same time, if there's too much of a focus on that, on material objects, this can hinder people in terms of their own pro-access. Binge drinking, that's one more aspect I would like to mention because there is a strong British influence. So right from the beginning, there was this tendency to drink a lot, which people brought with them, right? In order to forget their problems and also in terms of socializing. So it's very much, expected. So if you go out with people to have a drink, it's kind of almost like if you don't do it, it's kind of a bit strange. So this is, you're expected to drink when socializing. And there is this problem, and they're starting to recognize that now, that there is a large percentage of people that drink over the limit in terms of this binge drinking, specifically young people. So, they're trying to tackle this a little bit, but it's very much rooted in the culture. And then finally, just to end, there are just a few hypotheses of reurbanization. The Australia is growing in terms of the population. And specifically, one of the greatest groups, or the percentage of people immigrating from, for example, from Southeast Asia and also China, specifically China, but all of the Asian countries is growing. So there's a greater presence. So there's a changing demographic. And I think there is, although I think Australia could do more, they could maybe bring in more people, but you do see that changing demographic and giving more people this opportunity to enjoy this quality of life in Australia. And of course, you see that also in the urban form, this revitalization of the urban form that is definitely, they're changing old spaces and for the better, for new. So, of course, this is a very simple overview. It'd be interesting to research this in more detail. And finally, I would like to mention this trip, right, to Sydney as part of this larger, an extension to the conference, the Australasian Pacific Conference. So as Kim mentioned, I think the first weekend, I think the 18th to the 20th, right, of October will be the conference, but the following weekend, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, from the 25th to the 27th of October, we will have a 3-day tour. This tour is created by the locals, like people who live there. It's been very carefully thought out to really give you an immersive experience into the culture, into the history, the architectural and natural immersion of the city. So you're going to see the very best of Sydney. Of course, there's so much to do, but in 3 days, we'll try to show you to give you that taste of really what Sydney is about. So we send out an invitation for those people who are thinking and wanting to go to the conference to also come to Sydney afterwards, and you will be very well looked after and have a great experience. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Jaclyn. Let's invite Jeff and Kim to join us. Okay, thank you. So thank you so much. Very interesting, your presentations. Let's say hello to the people that were watching you. Manuela, Carmo, and Mark, right, from Brisbane. They live there. They are Brazilian. Manuela is Brazilian, right? But Mark is from Australia. Welcome. Thank you for being with us. Maria, a friend of us from Romania. Hello, good to see you. Michaela. Liliana from Bucharest. Adina, also. Mariana from Argentina. Who else? Daniela from Romania. A lot of people from Romania. John from Australia, right? He lives there, a friend of us. Lily from Brazil. Hello, welcome. João has a question that we will ask you in a minute. Luciano. Regina. Hello, Regina. And that's it. Okay, so
I was going to answer João's question, at least from the Adelaide perspective. I was at a Gilberto Gil concert last weekend, a famous Brazilian musician. He was giving, apparently, it's going to be his last Australian concert here in Adelaide. And the crowd was singing the refrain, right? All these hundreds of people were singing, like, wow, all these Aussies know these songs. And then very quickly, I realized that actually they're all Brazilians. So there was a huge Brazilian crowd there for this gig. And yes, there is quite a sizable Brazilian community in Adelaide, and probably, I imagine, in Sydney it will be manifold.
Up here as well.
I know in Brisbane, every time I'm in Brisbane, I hear Brazilian Portuguese in the streets. So yeah, there's a lot of people.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so very nice your presentation. I have a few questions for you guys. So there's a few impacts in the presentation. Let's go to Jeff in the second presentation. He talked about unlock your potential.
Yeah.
And I have repercussion always when you say this, right? And I just comment once, I saw this in the United Nations, like a video on YouTube, and I talked with him, I think last year it was, or 2 years ago, I cannot remember. This is so so strong impact. Can you comment a little more about it? How?
Sure. Yeah, it's a fantastic little mantra, right? I suppose it's a mantra that mantra gave us. And it's, mantras are really powerful things. They carry a lot of weight. And even if you think that your thoughts are important, when you put your thoughts into words, the impact is magnified, right? It's amplified, it's multiplied. And so, if you state for yourself, I will unlock my potentials, it's a massive statement, depending on the context you're thinking about. And obviously, what we study in conscientiology, and many of the benefits of conscientiology, is to help us think bigger about what are human potentials. Realistically, all those non-physical capabilities, those extrasensory perceptions and parapsychic things and so on. Much of society doesn't value those, but once you start to experiment them and you see it's a real part of being a human being, and you understand that your potentials are far, far beyond this conventional world and the conventional approach to things. It's really massive challenge and a massive, I think, a stimulation. It's almost a relief as well. Like, I mean, for me, we can be conditioned by the holothosene of Earth, which is one of more survival and struggle and difficulties. And we can, you know, the number of people with mental health issues in the world is huge, right? But if we can understand our truer essence and the real nature of what it is to be a consciousness that's evolving, whether you're a human or a subhuman being, we're all consciousness is evolving, but in our condition where we have a pretty decent brain, hopefully, and we can utilize it to really drive or accelerate our own evolution, then making a personal position where you're saying, look, I will do that. Because actually, I'm just thinking now, it reminds me of a verbiage that I presented in the tertularium, and it was called self-block. And it was tough. Like days before that verbiage, I was just getting hammered. It was really difficult. Even the morning of that one, Dr. Vera was there, you know, in the morning chat session we all used to have. And he was going, the verbiage today is going to be, self-block by Jeff. And he looks up and he goes, tough one, eh? And I was like going, yeah. And that morning in the tertularium, there was 3 serenissimuses appeared. Were there extra physically. Whether it was just for Wilder or something there, or whether it was because of the work that was being done because of that. So associating the self-block with positioning yourself to say, no, I'm going to fulfill, realize, manifest, be more coherent. That's our challenge. It's very easy to console ourselves and not push ourselves as hard as we can and just muddle along and have another life and do some good things, but not really push. And so, yeah, I think I've probably said more than enough, but sort of got me excited, so I talk too much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I have another question for Jaclyn. Okay.
Okay.
You were talking about your parents moved to Australia before you were born, but it was a months before you were born, or it was after years? How it was? Because it was interesting, right? Because this multiculturalism that you have in your heritage, right?
Yeah, interesting. So they moved 2 years before I was born. So
Okay.
in 79, and I was born in 81. So who knows what was happening before behind the scenes, but definitely this holothosene of migration is very strong in my family and I think in my paragenetics as well. So what's the connection with South Africa and Australia? And
so your project was clearly in Australia. It was really, really clear for you that what do you think that Sydney's culture helped you to adapt here in Brazil? Do you think there's something that helped you to adapt, to migrate to a new country?
Yeah. I mean, I think right from the beginning when I was growing up, it was just a diversity of people for me. Like I was, how could I say? I had best friends who were from, different cultures, and I grew up in that diversity. So I think I was always exposed to that, Australia gave me that because it had such a rich, even when I was growing up, maybe the schools that I went to, but it had that rich diversity of people. And maybe else I gravitated towards those people, right, from different cultures. But for sure, I think it helped me to open up more and be open-minded to different types of people. And that probably helped me when I moved to Brazil. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I was thinking also about the high quality of life, right? That it is in Sydney or in Australia, and you you move to Brazil. That is the opposite, right?
Yeah. maybe that didn't help me. Maybe that did the opposite. But yeah.
Yeah, it's an exercise of, out of negation, self-egocidio,
Ego-side, yeah, like letting go of a comfortable life and
how
having
is
to work
it
a bit harder.
for you in that sense? Can you comment a little about it?
Yeah, I've had to re-educate myself with a few things. It's still an ongoing process because I know things could be better, but you have to kind of accept the current situation and just go, look, that's how it is. It's, like with anything in life, and you can't expect things to be different when, you are the one who's come from outside. You're going to another group's territory in a way. You have to respect and I think you develop these postures, these more, I think, cosmoethical postures in relation to people. And
Okay. And we had the opportunity to go to Australia so we can experiment, this quality of life, the picnics, I hope we can have before or after the event. And here is Michaela, right? Mickey, that is talking. Hello from Romania. Thanks for your presentation. What do you expect to achieve by organizing the October event on urbanization and serenology in Australia?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's interesting to see how it unfolds, right? The things like, for example, the fact that Jaclyn is now organizing the event with Sydney, right? Like, it's like there's multiple sort of ripples or repercussions happening from creating this event. I think there are, I guess with everything that we do, right, we're thinking multidimensionally. There are the physical repercussions that we can see. So we're creating cooperation between all the Australia-based conscientiology researchers right now, and everybody is involved in creating this event. So we've got people in different parts of Australia, Sunshine Coast, Brisbane, as we said before, here in Adelaide. So that's creating a sense of common purpose and creativity. I have the feeling that we actually, some of the speakers who are coming from Brazil and from Europe, I think we're creating an opportunity for people who have some kind of karmic connection with Australia to express that, right? To explore maybe the place of Australia in their existential program by participating in this event. All the three of us here, Jeff, Jaclyn, and I, have all in the past been involved in teaching conscientiology in Australia in different ways, and are putting on courses and workshops and those sort of things. And this, for me, feels like, I don't quite know exactly how it will unfold, but it feels like a new step. It's something that we never did before, and it's hopefully, I have a sense it might open some new doors for us and for other people. Like, we're really keen to connect and help people who have an intermissive cause and who have an existential program that involves some connection with conscientiology here in Australia and in the region, for them to come to make a connection to our ideas, right? To make that accessible, and hopefully help some people, take steps in their existential programs, which will then continue to have ramifications for other people, right? It's these repercussions that keep on happening, and that's just on the introphysical level. So I was really interested, Jeff, that you talk about Colonel Light, right? Because Colonel Light is we're having this event in Adelaide, mainly for practical reasons. I was originally really keen to have it in the northeast, in Cairns, because that is the closest to the Pacific region and the Asian region, and it's also a beautiful part of the country. And it sort of seemed geographically it made sense, but practically it didn't make sense. It makes sense to do it here in Adelaide. And so then I'm curious now, Colonel Light is such an iconic figure, right? There's a statue of him here. There's a place named after him. It's part of the Adelaide story. And then to hear that he was in some extra-physical presence there in Brazil, was like, okay, what are those connections, right? What are the extra-physical connections that are making it unfold this way. And obviously, given the subject matter, I have to trust in the way this event is coming about that it is making some contribution to reurbanization that I don't understand from my perspective. So there are really many layers to this, and I'm sure you guys, Jeff and Jaclyn, would have some your own ideas on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. The time scale is something. So we often think, oh, you know, we're all impatient. We all want to see things very quickly, and sometimes it's just, no, it's going to take time for the facts to unfold and for us to perhaps grasp a little bit more understanding of things and see more synchronicities and so on. But yeah, the kernel light thing, just to leave the note registered, it was Pilar Allegri who, for some reason, out of the blue, just talked about the guy, and I didn't even realize or know who it was, but she knew, and she had been studying him recently for some reason. And so she said, yeah, he was here when you were talking, I saw him, and da-da-da-da-da. This was in CIAC presentation quite some years ago now. So yeah, it's definitely worth thinking on. And earlier when I remembered that, and I made a wee note, I was having like a little shower of energy as well. So it's interesting just to think more on it and see what's what, because he did a good job there in Adelaide, right? And look at his name, Light. It's not like it's, you know, it's not a pretty good name to have. It's not like like dark or terror or something, right? So it's like, you know, the guy's probably pretty good by the look of things. So yeah.
Do you want to comment a little more about the question of Vicky? That
yeah.
What do you mean
about? Yeah, what did I mean? No, it was something that our friends Felipe and Sylvia mentioned in relation to Donna. So I was talking with them in Germany at the event, and they were talking about Donna, who seems to also be a Serenissimus that they met. And it was a comment that Waldo had made to them about, you know, like they were like being invited to participate in that Serenissimus's larger team, but they had never thought about that. And just as likewise, I had never thought about that connection or that experience being like an invitation to think more, to connect more, to try and contribute. And so, yeah, no, I haven't had any extra-physical encounters that I recall. I'm not sort of one to seek them either, particularly. I'm not that kind of personality. But I'm trying to be a little bit more open to those possibilities. You know, I tend to just try to let things unfold naturally, and I don't want to force things and be like some kind of weird Serenissimus stalker kind of thing, right? So I just want to let things evolve at the rhythm that they need to evolve at. And so let's see, Mickey. I don't have anything more than that, but I will allow myself to feel a little bit more open to the possibilities of contributing to little tasks and that big mechanism that they're responsible for.
Yeah. Had you had other astrophysical encounters? No.
Not with her. I had once. I had a series of projections with a consciousness that, to the best I can work out for now, is a Serenissimus in India. But again, that was a few years ago, and when I was quite involved with stuff in Oman, and then I passed through India on one or two occasions, and a lot of very weird things happened, like the entire Air India airline system crashed for like 5 hours in the middle of the day, and you know, just stranded there going, okay, well, in India for a while. So anyway, there's just a number of things, but yeah, so not with Corrales, but with another one. And I sort of was doing an interview, you know, Dr. Vera wrote an interview to have with the Serenissimus, and I was actually asking a few questions from that interview. And that was very interesting. That was very, very interesting and quite impactful and liberating in a lot of ways, actually. He was really encouraging he kind of ridiculed a lot of rules and stuff, and said, just go ahead and do stuff. And, these rules and these things are just so stupid sometimes. And so, a lot of people might not like to hear that, but I kind of like to hear it. I was like, yeah, I'm with you. But, but really about contributing better energies, applying your energies, being conscious in the application of your energies, and actually really put your mind to it, and exteriorizing good energies to help improve environments was one of the bigger messages that he gave as well.
Coming back to Coralis, are you preparing for an intraphysical interview, Jeff? Prepare. Because this could happen any moment, and you don't want not to be prepared, right? That this is like in some moment could happen. Who knows, right? But this is so important.
I'm sure Serenissimus can forgive me for my incompetencies, but well, hey, who knows? Let's see. But it's timing, it's reasons, and consequences.
The thing is that we here in Brazil, here in Isaac, we perceive in some moments living here, and even Jaclyn has the very interesting experience, right, with Coralis, and we have like this. We talk, the Capricornio Excel. How can we say that?
The Tropic of Capricorn.
The Tropic of Capricorn.
Is that it, or is it something else?
We are in the same level, South Africa, Australia, Brazil.
Attitude. Yeah. There's a very close connection.
Yeah, and we connected this with Serenissimus and
the Southern Hemisphere as well. Yeah.
There's not a lot of land masses down here, so we got to stick together, right?
Yeah. Well, they're saying 90% of the population lives in the Northern Hemisphere, so it's 10%.
Well, I mean, I know South Africans and Australians and Brazilians. I know there's a real affinity amongst all those different groups. South Americans, I should say, more than just Brazilians, and Africa and Australia. I think they feel a real affinity. Not to forget our Asian friends.
Yeah, I know that Jaclyn has experience with Coralis. Do you want to comment? This pattern, how it's gonna help, or how can we take the opportunity maybe to unlock our potential contacting with this Serenissimus? What do you think about it? What is the relation?
I just had one experience, but I think going to Australia connecting to, the Serenissimus, just the fact that you want to understand more the holothosene, you tune in. But I think it was a synchronicity. I think Jeff was going to give a talk that day or something, and that morning about the Serenissimus. It was something like that. And in that morning during my penta, the message came, she is Coralia, or her name is Coralia. I need to see exactly.
Yeah.
And and I'm like, oh, it's a woman, maybe. So anyway, it's one piece of information. I think we need to, over time, collect different pieces of information.
Absolutely.
But for me, it was significant in that moment to feel like, there's that connection, right? And
I mean, it's only smart to evoke them, as Liliana mentions in the chat, right? To evoke them, to evoke better holothosenes. And I remember when Walter used to sit there in the tertularium, some days there'll be a Serenissimus, he'll go, he will start exteriorizing energy. Feel this. And he'll start exteriorizing the energy around. Yeah. And a couple of times I captured something really, really well. And I was going, this is awesome. And the feeling was this imperturbability. It passed. It gave. There was absolutely no need in me to think bad about anyone or anything. And I couldn't believe it. I was like going, wow, okay. Really. And then I held on to it for some minutes, that kind of holothosene and that idea. And that was the main thing for me. It was like, just no need to think bad about anyone. But it wasn't a superficial idea. Feeling that everywhere through you and just living that was like really, really impactful. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's the way. Easier said than done, right? Like, but that's the way.
And what's the connection with the astrophysical helpers, right, related to the reurbanization? How can we, John is asking.
I mean, I guess from my perspective, how do we feel about the conference and the connection with the helpers related to urbanization? The whole event, the inspiration for the event was clearly came from the helpers. And I didn't really even fully understand initially why the subject matter. Like, it's not like it was inspirational. And I don't really have the full picture. I don't feel like I have the full picture about what are the ramifications of having this event. But it does feel like it's going to contribute to energy. It feels like we're working with the helpers. I don't know how you guys feel, Jeff and Jaclyn, but for me, it feels like once we decided to go ahead with this event, there's been like a flow of energy that happens. And, I'm like this, obviously we're doing this as volunteers, life is busy, you tune in and out. And every time I tune back in, I know, like, yes, this is important. I need to stay focused on this. So I think we're in the flow of the extra-physical team pretty much.
Yeah, going to the flow. Do you think there's a connection with this question about Mickey? Will you have Aboriginal participants at your event? And if there's a connection with the urbanization, Aboriginal, because in Adelaide there's a lot of Aboriginal people. What do you think about it? It's two questions. Mickey's question and...
So in terms of participants, I mean, we will have, it is very common in Australia to have an Aboriginal welcome to country. So it's a kind of an acknowledgement. It's like a power diplomacy. You're acknowledging the Aboriginal extra-physical consciousnesses, and you're acknowledging that you're on their country. And you normally have an Aboriginal person do this. And so we will have a local elder who will open the event with that kind of activity for all the participants. Whether there will be people who will actually register for the conference who have Aboriginal ancestry, I have no idea at this point. But clearly, I think that in my presentation, I talked about the two holothosenes, the new one that we've brought as outsiders who've come to this country, and the old one that's been here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And when we talk about reurbanization in Australia, the connection between those holothosenes is definitely a key part. And if there are no physical Aboriginal people present, there will definitely be extra physical Aboriginal people present.
Okay. Here is Manuela encouraging you to present the next episode up on your post.
Hey, I just brought one out yesterday. The pressure is on.
Okay. And John is saying, great presentations. Thank you so much. We are about to finish. We have 1 minute. Do you want to do a wrap up or to close the conference with some comments? Would you like to present also the Eventbrite? Do you want me to share the?
Yes, if you've got it, please share it.
Yeah, let's. Okay.
And can you post the link? Can you post the link to the website? I tried before in the chat. It wouldn't let me.
Now sharing. Can you hear? Can you see?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So I will send. I sent before, but do you want to comment a little?
Well, I guess first Australasian Pacific Conference on Parareurbanology and Serenology. As the name suggests, it's capturing. We really wanted to reflect that region of which Australia is part, recognise the region of which Australia is part, and we have presentations, pretty much equal number of presentations, focusing either on parareurbanology and serenology. We also have, we're currently working at having some guest speakers, so people who are experienced consciousness researchers outside of conscientiology, who will bring different sort of angles to these domains. And as well as presentations, we are planning to have dynamics each at the end of each day. So there will be practical energy exercises and energy dynamics that will apply, or that will be focused in particular on these themes, right, that we're working with. This image here, obviously, this is not where we're having the event. This is the Tertuliarium, as many of you will know. But I've included it because, for me at least, one of the things that brought me to conscientiology was images of the CIA as it was back in the 90s. And I thought there might be some people who look at this and they will recognize the Tertuliarium from an out-of-body experience, for example, that they might have had. So we'll have Jaclyn's activities, as you know, in Sydney after the event. In Adelaide, we will also have extracurricular activities before the event. So if people come in the week before, and we definitely encourage people who are coming from overseas to come several days out, because jet lag is quite a big thing if you're coming from Europe or South America to Australia. Allow yourself some time to get settled in, to get used to the time zone, to get used to the changes. And so we'll have some activities around Adelaide. You'll get to meet some of our beautiful animals. We'll do some bioenergy sessions in some of the parks, probably botanic gardens here, and do some guided tourism experiences, right? I've obviously got a lot of background here with my work with Aboriginal communities around local history, with a particular focus on Aboriginal people. So we'll put on some activities. Most of them will be free. Some might have a small cost attached to them. But yeah, that's pretty much the event happening October this year.
Yeah. So come with us, right? Have your own experience, right? Jeff, Jaclyn, last comments?
No, just thanks for the opportunity. Great to chat and meet up tonight, and hope you guys got something out of it.
Yeah, no, just same with me. It's great to talk about, to contribute to this discussion in relation to Australia, and just, sending out an invitation to everyone. If you're interested, get in contact with us as well. I think through the Isaac email, there's a contact even about the Sydney part of the trip or the event itself. So
here is is our email also if you want to contact us, but there's an email about the conference, right? So it's people wants to conference@isaaccons.org. Okay. So I would like to thank you for presenting it. I think it was very interesting. It was excellent presentations, the ideas. Also, I would like to thank all the people that were with us today in the morning or in the evening, Australian. It was a pleasant, people from Europe also, so different time zones. And just again, reinforcing the invitation to Australia in October. It will be a very good experience for all of us. We have this opportunity now to know or to meet new people from intermissivists from Australia. And I think it's a big opportunity to know each other, to perceive Corallis energies, all people that are there. So thank you so much, and see you in other opportunities. And thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
See you later.